Willow Creek Asylum was built in the late 1800s on the outskirts of a small town that had long since faded into obscurity. The building was massive, a stone fortress surrounded by dense woods. For over a century, it housed the mentally ill, the criminally insane, and those society had forgotten. It was said that many who entered never left, and the grim stories surrounding the asylum became part of local folklore. People claimed they heard screams echoing from the halls at night, even though the asylum had been abandoned for decades. Nathan, a young journalist, had always been fascinated by these ghost stories. When he received an assignment to write an article on the most haunted places in the country, Willow Creek Asylum was at the top of his list. Armed with nothing but his camera and a sense of adventure, he set out to explore the infamous asylum, unaware that his investigation would uncover something far darker than he could have imagined. As he drove closer to the asylum, Nathan felt a growing sense of unease. The road leading to Willow Creek was narrow and lined with dead trees, their gnarled branches casting eerie shadows on the pavement. The asylum loomed ahead, its towering structure barely visible through the thick fog that had settled over the area. The once grand building was now crumbling, its windows shattered, and its stone walls covered in ivy. It looked like the kind of place where nightmares were born. Nathan parked his car at the entrance of the asylum, staring up at the imposing structure. The air was heavy with silence, broken only by the occasional rustle of leaves in the wind. He pulled out his camera, determined to document every detail of his journey. As he stepped through the rusted gates, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. Inside, the asylum was even more eerie than Nathan had anticipated. The floors were covered in dust, and the walls were lined with old medical equipment and crumbling furniture. The air was thick with the smell of mildew, and the oppressive silence was broken only by the occasional creak of the building settling. Nathan's footsteps echoed through the empty halls as he made his way deeper into the asylum. As he explored the various rooms, Nathan began to notice strange things. Doors that he could have sworn were closed would be open when he returned. He would catch glimpses of movement out of the corner of his eye, only to find nothing there when he turned to look. At first, he dismissed it as his imagination playing tricks on him. But as the strange occurrences continued, he began to wonder if he really was alone. In the farthest corner of the asylum, Nathan stumbled upon a hidden room that wasn't on any of the blueprints he had studied. The door was heavy and rusted shut, but after several attempts, he managed to force it open. Inside, he found a small, dimly lit room that appeared to be some sort of makeshift office. On the desk, he found a collection of old documents, patient records that detailed horrific experiments performed on the asylum's inmates. The deeper Nathan delved into the records, the more disturbed he became. The asylum had been a place of unimaginable cruelty. The doctors had conducted experiments on the patients, using them as test subjects for bizarre and dangerous procedures. Many of the patients had died as a result, their bodies buried in unmarked graves behind the asylum. Nathan realized that the asylum's dark past had been hidden for years, and he had uncovered something that was never meant to be found. That night, Nathan decided to stay in the asylum to continue his investigation. He set up camp in one of the less damaged rooms, setting his camera on a tripod to capture any paranormal activity. As the night wore on, the temperature in the room dropped and Nathan could see his breath in the air. The silence was deafening, and every creak and groan of the building seemed amplified. Around midnight, Nathan began to hear the sound of footsteps in the hall outside his room. He grabbed his flashlight and camera, cautiously stepping into the corridor. The footsteps continued, growing louder as they approached, but when Nathan turned the corner, there was no one there. His heart raced as he scanned the empty hallway, his flashlight flickering in the darkness. Suddenly, a door at the far end of the hall slammed shut with a deafening bang. Nathan jumped, his hands trembling as he aimed his camera at the door. Slowly, he approached it, the floor creaking beneath his feet. He reached for the doorknob, his breath catching in his throat. The door swung open on its own, revealing a room filled with old medical equipment. But something was wrong. The air in the room felt thick, heavy with a presence that Nathan couldn't explain. As he stepped inside, the temperature dropped even further. His camera began to malfunction, the screen flickering as if something was interfering with the electronics. Nathan's flashlight flickered, and then went out, plunging him into darkness. Panic set in as he fumbled to turn it back on, but when the light finally came back, he was no longer alone. Standing in the corner of the room was a figure, a shadowy, indistinct shape that seemed to be watching him. Nathan froze, his heart pounding in his chest. The figure didn't move, but its presence was overwhelming, filling the room with a sense of dread. Nathan took a step back and the figure began to move toward him. Nathan bolted out of the room, his heart racing as he sprinted down the hallway. The footsteps behind him grew louder, faster, as if something was chasing him. He didn't dare look back, focusing only on reaching the exit. The asylum seemed to shift around him, the corridors growing longer, twisting in ways that didn't make sense. No matter which way he turned, the exit always seemed just out of reach. The air grew colder, and Nathan could feel a presence closing in on him. His breath came in short, ragged gasps as he pushed himself to keep running. Doors slammed shut behind him, and the walls seemed to close in, trapping him in a maze of endless hallways. He could hear the whispers now, voices that seemed to come from all around him, growing louder with each step. Suddenly, Nathan tripped, falling hard to the ground. His camera flew out of his hand, sliding across the floor. As he scrambled to his feet, the shadowy figure appeared at the end of the hallway, blocking his path. It stood there, watching him, its eyes glowing faintly in the darkness. Desperate, Nathan turned and ran in the opposite direction. But the figure was always there, no matter which way he went. It was as if the asylum itself was alive, twisting and reshaping to keep him trapped inside. He could feel the walls closing in, the air growing thicker, suffocating him. Finally, Nathan found a door that wasn't locked. He threw it open and stumbled into a stairwell, the cold air hitting him like a wave. Without thinking, he bolted up the stairs, taking them two at a time, his legs burning with effort. Nathan burst through the door at the top of the stairwell and found himself on the roof of the asylum. The cold night air hit him like a wall, but for a moment, he felt a sense of relief. He was outside. He could see the thick forest that surrounded the asylum, the trees swaying gently in the wind under the pale moonlight. But his relief was short-lived. The door slammed shut behind him with a deafening bang, and when he turned to grab the handle, it wouldn't budge. He was trapped. Panic set in again as he realized there was no way down. The roof of the asylum was high, with sheer drops on all sides. There were no ladders, no fire escapes, nothing to help him climb down. Nathan's mind raced, searching for a solution, but his thoughts were clouded by the growing sense of dread that had followed him all night. Suddenly, the shadowy figure appeared on the rooftop, materializing out of the darkness as if it had been there all along. Nathan's heart leapt into his throat as he backed away, the edge of the roof dangerously close behind him. The figure moved slowly toward him, its form shifting and twisting like smoke, but its glowing eyes remained fixed on him, unblinking. Nathan's breath quickened. He scanned the rooftop, desperately searching for anything that could help him escape. There was nowhere to hide, nowhere to run. He was trapped between the figure and the deadly drop behind him. The figure stopped a few feet away from Nathan, its presence overwhelming. It didn't speak, but Nathan could feel its intentions. It wanted him to suffer, to experience the same terror and helplessness that the patients of the asylum had endured. The realization hit him like a punch to the gut. This was more than just a haunting. The figure was one of the spirits of the asylum, a victim of the terrible experiments conducted here, and it wanted revenge. With no other options, Nathan backed toward the edge of the roof, his heart pounding in his chest. The figure remained motionless, watching him, as if waiting for him to make his choice. Nathan's legs shook as he stood at the edge, staring down at the dark ground far below. Suddenly, the figure lunged. In a split second, Nathan made a desperate decision. Instead of jumping off the roof, he dove to the side, rolling across the cold stone surface as the figure's outstretched hand missed him by inches. He scrambled to his feet, breathing heavily, and ran to the other side of the roof. But the figure was faster than he expected. It reappeared in front of him, blocking his path once again. Nathan was out of options. He had no weapons, no way to fight back, and no escape route. His mind raced, trying to think of anything that could stop the spirit. As the figure approached, Nathan suddenly remembered the patient records he had found earlier. They had detailed the horrific experiments conducted on the patients, but they had also mentioned something else: a ritual. One of the doctors had been obsessed with the idea of controlling the spirits of the dead. He had performed countless rituals, attempting to trap the souls of the patients within the asylum's walls, binding them to the building forever. Nathan realized that the figure wasn't just haunting the asylum, it was bound to it. In a desperate attempt, Nathan shouted, "I know what they did to you. I know how they trapped you here." The figure paused, its glowing eyes narrowing as it regarded him. "They used a ritual," Nathan continued, his voice trembling. "They bound you to this place, but you don't have to stay. I can help you break free." The figure remained silent, but Nathan could feel the tension in the air shift. The wind picked up, howling across the rooftop as the figure loomed closer. "I don't want to hurt you," Nathan said, his voice barely audible over the wind. "But if you come any closer, I will destroy the records. You'll be trapped here forever." For a moment, everything was still. Then, to Nathan's astonishment, the figure stopped. It stood there, its form flickering in the darkness, as if it were considering his offer. Nathan's mind raced. He didn't actually know how to perform the ritual to free the spirit, but he had to buy himself more time. Slowly, he backed away, keeping his eyes on the figure. He reached into his bag, pulling out the old patient records. "This is your chance," Nathan said, holding up the documents. "I can destroy these or I can help you move on, but you have to let me go." The figure hesitated, its form flickering even more violently now. For the first time, Nathan thought he saw something else in its glowing eyes: fear. Without warning, the figure lunged at Nathan again, but this time, it wasn't trying to harm him. It was desperate. The spirit was bound to the asylum, but it wanted freedom, and Nathan was its only hope. With trembling hands, Nathan began to tear the patient records apart. As he did, the figure let out an ear-piercing scream, its form twisting and writhing in agony. The wind howled even louder, and the entire asylum seemed to shake. Nathan didn't stop. He ripped the documents into shreds, and with each piece that fell to the ground, the figure grew weaker. Finally, with one last scream, the spirit vanished, dissipating into the night like smoke on the wind. Nathan stood on the rooftop, panting and drenched in sweat. The asylum was silent once again, but this time, the silence felt different, the oppressive. Moving into Greystone Manor had been a dream come true for Angela and her family. Nestled deep in the countryside, the sprawling old mansion offered privacy, space, and a fresh start. Angela, her husband David, and their two children, Emma and Luke, were eager to leave the hustle of city life behind and enjoy a slower pace in their new home. The towering stone walls, ancient oak trees, and ivy-covered facade gave the house a mysterious charm. Yet from the moment they stepped inside, there was a heavy, unsettling air that Angela couldn't quite shake. She brushed it off as nerves. Moving to a massive house miles away from any neighbors was bound to feel overwhelming at first. But something about the manor felt wrong. The first few days passed without incident. Angela busied herself unpacking, while the kids explored the endless rooms and hallways, thrilled to be living in a place that felt like it had come straight out of a fairy tale. David was excited too, already planning renovations for the older parts of the house. It wasn't until the third night that the strange occurrences began. Angela had been up late organizing the kitchen when she heard footsteps upstairs. Soft, deliberate, and out of place. Her heart skipped a beat. David was sound asleep and the kids had gone to bed hours ago. She paused, listening intently, but the sound vanished. Dismissing it as her imagination, Angela resumed her work. Then it happened again. The footsteps, closer this time, coming from the hallway just above her. Slowly, she set down the plates she had been arranging and made her way upstairs. The house was eerily quiet, the kind of silence that presses against your ears. She stood in the hallway, her breath shallow, straining to hear anything out of the ordinary. A creak, then a soft thud. Angela turned toward the source of the noise, Emma's room. Her daughter's door was slightly ajar and a dim light spilled out into the hallway. She tiptoed forward, pushing the door open. Inside, Emma lay peacefully in her bed, her face soft and serene under the glow of the nightlight. Everything seemed normal, yet Angela couldn't shake the feeling that something, or someone, had been there. As the days passed, the strange noises became more frequent. It was no longer just footsteps at night. Doors would creak open on their own, and Angela began finding objects in places she hadn't left them. A chair pulled out from the dining table, a window unlocked that she was sure she had closed, and cold drafts that appeared out of nowhere, chilling the rooms even when the windows were shut tight. David remained skeptical. He chalked it up to the house being old, with settling floors and drafty windows. But Angela knew better. Greystone Manor wasn't just old, it was alive with something. A presence, lingering just out of sight, watching, waiting. One evening, Angela decided to confront her unease head-on. After putting the kids to bed, she sat in the library, a thick tome on local history spread out before her. She scoured its pages, searching for any mention of Greystone Manor. The house was over 2 centuries old. Surely there had to be some record of its past. After hours of reading, she found what she was looking for. Greystone Manor had once been the home of the Greystone family, wealthy landowners who had fallen into ruin in the early 1900s. The head of the family, Edward Greystone, had been a reclusive figure, known for his obsession with spiritualism and the occult. Rumor had it that he had conducted seances in the manor, attempting to communicate with the dead. But something had gone horribly wrong. The Greystone family disappeared under mysterious circumstances, and the house had remained abandoned for decades, shrouded in dark rumors. Angela felt a chill run down her spine. Could it be that Edward Greystone had succeeded in summoning something that now refused to leave? That night, Angela was jolted awake by a loud bang. Her heart raced as she leapt out of bed, pulling on her robe and hurrying down the hall. The noise had come from the children's rooms. She threw open Emma's door, her breath catching in her throat. Emma's bed was empty. Panic surged through Angela's veins as she scanned the room. Emma was gone, and her bed sheets were rumpled, as though she had been pulled out of bed in a hurry. The window was wide open, the curtains billowing in the cold night air. Angela rushed to the window, her eyes darting across the darkened yard below. But there was no sign of her daughter. "David," she screamed, her voice trembling. "David, wake up." Within moments, David was by her side, confusion and fear written across his face. "What's going on? Where's Emma?" "I don't know," Angela stammered, her hands shaking as she grabbed her phone to call the police. But before she could dial, a soft whisper echoed through the room. It was faint, barely audible, but unmistakable. Emma's voice. "Mama." Angela froze, her eyes wide with terror. The voice wasn't coming from outside. It was coming from the closet. David moved first, pulling open the closet door in one swift motion. Inside, they found Emma huddled in the corner, her eyes wide and filled with tears. She was clutching a small, worn-out doll they hadn't seen before. Angela fell to her knees, pulling her daughter into her arms. "Emma, what happened? Why were you hiding in here?" Emma shook her head, too frightened to speak. Her eyes kept darting toward the doll in her hands. Angela gently took it from her, examining it under the dim light of the nightstand lamp. It was old, very old, with tattered clothes and a face that had once been painted, but was now faded and cracked. It looked like something that had been buried in the house for decades. "Where did you get this?" Angela asked softly, but Emma wouldn't answer. She just pointed toward the window. That night, Angela couldn't sleep. She sat in the living room, the doll lying on the coffee table in front of her, its empty eyes staring into nothingness. Every time she glanced at it, she felt a strange sense of unease, as though the doll was watching her. Angela's mind raced. What had happened to Emma? Why had she been hiding, and where had the doll come from? She remembered the story of Edward Greystone and his experiments with the occult. Could the doll be connected to the spirits that supposedly haunted the manor? She needed answers. The next morning, Angela drove into town to visit the local historical society. She had to know more about the Greystone family and the dark history of the manor. After hours of searching through dusty records, she finally found something, an old newspaper article from 1912, detailing the mysterious disappearance of the Greystone family. According to the article, Edward Greystone had been conducting a seance the night the family vanished. Witnesses reported seeing strange lights in the windows of the manor, and several locals claimed to have heard eerie chanting coming from within. But there was something else, something that made Angela's blood run cold. The article mentioned a doll, identical to the one Emma had found. It had been used in Edward Greystone's rituals, a vessel for the spirits he was trying to summon. Angela hurried back to the manor, her heart pounding in her chest. She had to destroy the doll before whatever was haunting the house took her family, just like it had taken the Greystones. But when she returned home, the doll was gone, and so was Emma. Panic surged through Angela as she frantically searched the house. Every room felt like a maze, the walls closing in around her. "Emma," she cried, her voice echoing through the empty halls. "Where are you?" She raced upstairs, throwing open doors and checking closets, but each room was empty. The oppressive silence weighed heavily on her, making it hard to breathe. Desperate, Angela returned to Emma's room, scanning every corner. Then she noticed it. The closet door was slightly ajar, the same closet where she had found Emma just hours before. Heart pounding, Angela approached and pushed it open. Inside, the air felt different, charged with a strange energy. She could see shadows dancing at the edges of her vision, but when she turned her head, nothing was there. "Emma?" she whispered, stepping inside. The space felt colder, as if she had entered another world. A chill ran down her spine as she felt the weight of unseen eyes upon her. Suddenly, a gust of wind whipped through the closet, sending the clothes swirling around her. Angela stumbled back, her heart racing. "Emma," she screamed again, but this time her voice was drowned out by a cacophony of whispers. They swirled around her, echoing off the walls, a blend of cries and laughter that made her blood run cold. Then, amidst the chaos, she heard her daughter's voice again. "Mama! Emma!" Angela cried. But the closet felt like it was closing in, the shadows pressing against her. "I'm coming for you." In a surge of adrenaline, Angela reached for the back of the closet. She pushed aside a pile of clothes, revealing a hidden door, its surface rough and weathered. It was ajar, a faint light spilling from within. Without hesitation, she pulled it open and stepped inside. The passage was narrow and dark, the air thick with dust and decay. Angela could feel the weight of the mansion above her, the ancient wood creaking ominously. She pressed on, her heart racing as she followed the faint glow that illuminated the path ahead. The whispers grew louder, echoing off the stone walls. Angela strained to listen, trying to discern what they were saying. It felt like a call, a beckoning that both terrified and compelled her to move forward. "Emma!" she shouted, but her voice was swallowed by the shadows. Just as despair began to creep in, she turned a corner and found herself in a small, dimly lit chamber. The walls were lined with shelves filled with old books, dusty relics of a time long gone, and in the center of the room stood a table, an altar of sorts, upon which lay several dolls, their glassy eyes reflecting the faint light. Among them was the doll Emma had found. Angela's heart dropped. She rushed forward, but as she reached for it, the whispers intensified, swirling around her like a storm. "No, you mustn't!" a voice cried, sharp and clear amidst the chaos. Angela froze, recognizing the tone. It was Edward Greystone. "Leave this place. It is not safe." "Where's my daughter?" Angela shouted, her voice filled with desperation. "What have you done to her?" "She is not lost, but you must understand. The dolls are vessels and the spirits are restless." Edward's voice echoed through the chamber, a warning laced with urgency. "You cannot control what you do not understand." Angela felt a wave of cold wash over her, a foreboding that gripped her heart. She needed to act quickly. "How do I save her?" she demanded. "Destroy the dolls. Break the curse," Edward's voice pleaded. But before Angela could respond, the room darkened, and shadows began to swirl around her. The whispers turned into screams, a cacophony of tormented souls echoing in her ears. Summoning her courage, Angela grabbed the nearest doll and hurled it against the stone wall. It shattered into pieces, and as it did, a blinding light filled the chamber. The screams subsided, replaced by a haunting silence that enveloped her. In the eerie quiet, Angela felt a shift in the air. The shadows that had clung to her began to recede, and the chamber's oppressive atmosphere lifted slightly. But there was no time to waste. She had to find Emma. With renewed determination, Angela smashed another doll, each shattering piece sending ripples of light through the room. Each time a doll broke, she could feel the tension in the airlift. The spirits trapped within began to disperse, their anguished cries fading into whispers of gratitude. As the last doll shattered, a wave of warmth washed over Angela. The shadows retreated, revealing a bright light at the far end of the chamber. She stopped toward it, her heart pounding with hope. The light grew brighter, and as she approached, she saw a figure standing there. Emma. She was safe, her eyes shining with an innocent joy that warmed Angela's heart. "Mama!" Emma cried, rushing into her mother's arms. "I was scared." "I know, sweetheart, but we're okay now." Angela hugged her tightly, relief flooding through her. But just as they embraced, a dark figure loomed in the shadows behind them, Edward Greystone. His eyes burned with anger and sorrow as he stepped forward. "You freed them, but the curse is not yet broken. You must leave this place." Angela felt a chill run down her spine. "What do you mean? What about you?" "I am bound to this place, a prisoner of my own making. But your daughter, she is innocent. You must take her away before it is too late." Before Angela could respond, the chamber began to shake. The walls trembled, dust falling from the ceiling. The spirits, now free, swirled around them, their faces twisted in agony. "Go before the house collapses," Edward shouted, his voice filled with urgency. Grabbing Emma's hand, Angela turned and ran toward the light, the sound of crashing stone and splintering wood echoing behind them. The passageway felt endless, darkness threatening to swallow them whole. "Keep running," Angela urged, her heart racing as they neared the exit. She could hear the cries of the spirits, a mixture of anger and despair, urging her to hurry. Just as they reached the end of the tunnel, the ground shook violently, and the walls began to close in. With one final push, they burst out of the passage and into the hallway of the manor, just as the ceiling above them collapsed in a shower of dust and debris. "Out the front door!" Angela shouted, leading Emma toward the staircase. They dashed down the hall, and as they neared the exit, the front door swung open, revealing the bright morning light outside. As they stepped through the threshold, Angela turned back one last time. The manor was crumbling, shadows writhing in the wreckage. But she could see Edward's figure standing at the top of the stairs, watching them with a mixture of sorrow and gratitude. "Thank you," he mouthed, just before the house imploded, collapsing into a cloud of dust and echoes of the past. Angela pulled Emma close as they stumbled into the sunlight. They fell to their knees, breathing heavily, the warmth of the sun washing over them. "Are we safe now, Mama?" Emma asked, her voice trembling. Angela looked at the ruins of Greystone Manor, a bittersweet mixture of relief and sadness washing over her. "Yes, sweetheart, we're safe now." But as they sat there, a single breeze rustled through the air, carrying with it the faintest whisper, "Thank you." When Sarah and Mark decided to buy an old Victorian house in the quiet town of Eldridge, they were excited about their new beginning. The house had character, history, and plenty of space for their growing family. It sat on a large lot, surrounded by trees that whispered secrets in the wind. The first night in their new home was magical. They set up their furniture, laughed over takeout, and admired the intricate woodwork that adorned the walls. But as the sun dipped below the horizon, a chill crept through the air, wrapping around them like a shroud. "Did you hear that?" Mark asked, pausing mid-bite. "Hear what?" Sarah replied, her brow furrowing. "It sounded like whispering," he said, glancing toward the darkened hallway. Sarah shrugged it off. "It's just the wind. This place is old. It's bound to make some noises." But deep down, She felt a shiver of unease. That night, as they settled into bed, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Shadows danced on the walls, and every creak of the house made her heart race. She tossed and turned, finally drifting into a restless sleep. The next morning, Sarah woke to find Mark already in the kitchen. The sunlight streamed through the windows, illuminating the space. "Good morning? How did you sleep?" he asked, cheerfully pouring coffee. "Not great," Sarah admitted, rubbing her eyes. "I kept hearing whispers. It was creepy." Mark chuckled. "You're just not used to the sounds of an old house. Give it some time." But that evening, as twilight descended, the whispers returned. This time, Sarah was certain she heard her name. Sarah. It was soft and melodic, a siren's call that sent chills down her spine. "Did you hear that?" she asked, her heart pounding. "Hear what?" Mark replied, looking up from his book. "The whispers. They're back." "Just the wind again, babe," he said, brushing it off. But Sarah couldn't shake the feeling. The following nights were filled with the eerie whispers, each time growing louder, more distinct. It felt as if someone, or something, was trying to communicate with her. Determined to uncover the truth, Sarah began researching the history of the house. She discovered that it had once belonged to a family named the Whitmores, who had mysteriously disappeared without a trace. Locals whispered about hauntings, about voices that echoed through the halls, but Sarah dismissed the stories as mere superstition. One afternoon, she visited the local library, poring over old newspapers and records. A particular article caught her eye: "The disappearance of the Whitmore family, a mystery still unsolved." The article detailed strange occurrences in the house before their disappearance, including whispers in the night and sightings of shadowy figures. As she read, a shiver ran down her spine. She felt a connection to the family, as if their fate was somehow intertwined with hers. That night, the whispers intensified. "Sarah, help us." She sat up in bed, heart racing. "What do you want?" she shouted into the darkness. The response was immediate, a deafening silence, then a soft sobbing that echoed through the house. It was a chilling sound filled with sorrow and despair. Desperate for answers, Sarah decided to conduct a seance, hoping to reach out to the spirits trapped within the house. She invited a local medium, Clara, who was known for her connection to the spiritual realm. As Clara arrived, the atmosphere shifted. She entered the living room, her presence commanding yet gentle. "I can feel the energy in this house," she said, her eyes scanning the room. "There are spirits here, lost, longing for release." As they gathered around the table, Clara closed her eyes and began to chant softly. The air grew thick with tension, and Sarah felt a cold breeze sweep through the room. The candles flickered, casting eerie shadows on the walls. "Is anyone here?" Clara asked, her voice steady. Suddenly, the temperature dropped, and a whisper filled the air, clear and urgent. "Help us. Find us." Tears sprang to Sarah's eyes. "What happened to you?" she asked, her voice trembling. Clara's face contorted with concentration. "They want you to know. It's not safe. The house holds secrets, dark secrets." At that moment, the lights flickered violently and the table shook. Sarah gasped, instinctively reaching for Mark's hand. "What do we need to do?" she urged Clara. "You must uncover the truth. Only then can they be free." The following days were filled with dread as Sarah and Mark delved deeper into the house's history. They found hidden compartments in the walls, filled with old letters and photographs of the Whitmore family. Each piece revealed a darker side to their lives: financial troubles, arguments, and an obsession with the occult. One night, while sorting through the old belongings, Sarah found a diary belonging to Mrs. Whitmore. The entry spoke of strange happenings in the house, her descent into madness and her desperate attempts to contact the spirits of those who had died before her. "Sarah, look at this," Mark called. holding up an old, tattered photograph of the Whitmore family. "They look just like us." His words sent a chill down Sarah's spine. She examined the photo closely. The resemblance was uncanny. That night, the whispers returned, stronger than ever. "Sarah, help us." The weight of their despair pressed heavily on her chest. "What do you need?" she whispered into the dark, but the only response was a chilling silence. Determined to end the torment, Sarah and Mark organized another seance, this time inviting Clara back along with several friends for support. The atmosphere was charged with anticipation and fear. As they gathered around the table, Clara began to chant once more. The air crackled with energy, and shadows danced along the walls. Suddenly, the temperature dropped, and a voice broke through the silence. "Find the truth. In the basement." "Basement?" Sarah repeated, her heart racing. Clara nodded, her expression serious. "They're guiding you. You must go there." With a mix of dread and determination, Sarah and Mark made their way to the basement, Clara leading the way. The air was heavy with tension as they descended the creaking stairs. Once inside, they noticed an old trunk in the corner, covered in dust. Sarah approached it, her heart pounding. "This must be it," she said, glancing at Mark. As they opened the trunk, a wave of cold air rushed out. Inside lay a collection of journals, documents, and eerie artifacts. Among them was a book filled with occult symbols and rituals. "What is this?" Mark asked, flipping through the pages. "It looks like they were trying to contact the dead," Sarah replied, a sense of foreboding creeping in. Suddenly, the whispers returned, rising to a crescendo. "Stop, before it's too late." The room shook violently, dust and debris falling from the ceiling. "We need to leave," Clara shouted, panic in her eyes. But Sarah couldn't move. "No, we have to finish this." In that moment, the trunk burst open, releasing a blinding light that enveloped them. Sarah felt herself being pulled into the light, the voices around her rising to a fever pitch. "Free us." When the light faded, Sarah found herself standing in a darkened version of the basement. Before her stood the apparitions of the Whitmore family, their faces twisted in anguish. "Help us," Mrs. Whitmore cried, her voice filled with despair. "We are trapped." "Why?" Sarah asked, tears streaming down her face. "What happened to you?" "The house. It feeds on sorrow. We were lured into darkness and now we cannot escape." "Then how do I help you?" Sarah pleaded, desperation clawing at her heart. "Break the cycle. Destroy the source," Mrs. Whitmore urged, pointing toward the trunk. With a sense of purpose, Sarah approached the trunk once more. She knew what she had to do. "I will set you free." As she opened the trunk, a blast of wind rushed past her, and the apparitions wailed. "No, it's too dangerous." But Sarah felt a surge of strength. "I won't let you suffer anymore." She grabbed the occult book and hurled it into the darkness, watching as it disintegrated into ash. The room shook violently, shadows swirling around her, but she stood her ground. "You are free!" she screamed. As the last remnants of the darkness evaporated, the apparitions smiled, their faces serene. "Thank you," they whispered in unison before fading away. When Sarah awoke, she was back in her living room, Mark beside her. The sun streamed through the windows, casting a warm glow throughout the house. The oppressive energy had lifted. The air felt light, almost joyous. "Sarah, you okay?" Mark asked, concern etched on his face. I think we did it," she replied, her heart swelling with hope. They looked around, the house feeling like a different place entirely. No more whispers, no more shadows lurking in the corners. It was as if the spirits had finally found peace. As they settled into their new life, Sarah often thought of the Whitmore family. They had been lost, but now they were free. And in their freedom, Sarah and Mark found a sense of belonging in their new home, a place filled with love, laughter, and the promise of new beginnings. Emily had always been fascinated by antiques. When she stumbled upon a small, dusty shop tucked away in a forgotten corner of town, her heart raced with excitement. The shop was filled with an eclectic mix of vintage items, but one thing caught her eye: a porcelain doll with hauntingly beautiful features and eyes that seemed to follow her. "Where did you find this?" she asked the shopkeeper, her fingers brushing against the doll's delicate dress. "It has a history," the shopkeeper replied, a shadow crossing his face. "Legend says it's cursed. It brings misfortune to its owners." Emily shrugged off his warning. She was drawn to the doll, its intricate details enchanting her. Ignoring the shopkeeper's caution, she purchased it and took it home, excited to add it to her growing collection. That night, as she placed the doll on a shelf in her bedroom, she felt a strange chill in the air. Dismissing it as a draft, she settled into bed, unaware of the darkness that had now entered her life. In the days that followed, strange things began to happen. Emily noticed objects in her home moving from their places. At first, she thought she was just being forgetful. But then the incidents escalated. One evening, she found the doll had been moved from her shelf to her bedside table. "That's odd," she muttered, brushing it off as her own forgetfulness. But when it happened again, she began to feel a sense of unease creeping over her. The whispers started soon after, soft, indistinct murmurs that seemed to echo through her home. "Emily," they called, the voice laced with an unsettling familiarity. Each night, the whispers grew louder, filling her dreams with dark visions and shadows that danced at the edges of her consciousness. As her sleep became increasingly disturbed, Emily started to experience nightmares. In her dreams, she saw the doll, its porcelain face twisted into a sinister grin. The whispers became urgent, demanding her attention. "You must listen. You must obey." Desperate to understand what was happening, Emily began researching the doll's origins. She discovered that it had belonged to a young girl named Clara, who had died tragically under mysterious circumstances. Clara's family had reported strange happenings in their home, similar to what Emily was experiencing. Could it be the doll? She wondered, a chill running down her spine. She found an old photograph of Clara holding the doll, her eyes filled with a mix of innocence and sorrow. Determined to get to the bottom of the mystery, Emily reached out to a local historian who specialized in cursed objects. When she met with him, he confirmed her fears. "This doll has a dark past," he said, his voice grave. "Clara was never at peace. Her spirit is bound to that doll, and it has the power to manipulate those who possess it." Emily's heart raced. "What can I do?" she asked, fear creeping into her voice. "You must confront the spirit," he advised. "Help Clara find closure, or the curse will only grow stronger." That night, Emily prepared for a seance, hoping to communicate with Clara's spirit. She gathered candles, incense, and a few personal items that once belonged to the girl. As darkness fell, she lit the candles and focused her thoughts on the doll. "Clara, if you can hear me, please come forward," she whispered, her voice trembling. The room fell silent, the air thick with anticipation. Suddenly, the temperature dropped, and the candle flames flickered. A soft voice filled the air, sorrowful and sweet. "Help me." Emily's heart ached. "What happened to you, Clara?" "I was betrayed," the voice replied, filled with pain. "I need to be free." "Free from what?" Emily pressed, feeling a deep connection to the spirit. "From the darkness that holds me here," Clara explained. "I was not meant to die. Help me find my lost memories." Determined to help Clara, Emily delved deeper into the history surrounding the girl's tragic death. She discovered that Clara had been a vibrant child, loved by her family, until a mysterious illness struck. Rumors circulated about dark forces at play, and the family was shunned by the community. Emily learned that Clara had a cherished diary, filled with her thoughts and dreams. It was rumored to be hidden somewhere in the attic of her childhood home, now abandoned and decrepit. "Clara, I'll find your diary," Emily promised. "I'll help you remember." With a sense of purpose, Emily set out for the old house, armed with a flashlight and determination. The building loomed in the distance, its windows shattered and its structure sagging. As she stepped inside, the air felt thick with grief. Climbing the stairs to the attic, she searched through the dusty remnants of Clara's life. Suddenly, a rustling sound made her jump. The shadows seemed to pulse around her, whispering, "You're close." With each passing moment, her heart raced. Finally, she spotted a small trunk in the corner. She opened it, revealing a collection of old toys and a small, leather-bound diary. Tears filled her eyes as she realized this was it. As she flipped through the pages, Clara's voice echoed in her mind, recounting the joys of her life and the despair of her untimely death. With the diary in hand, Emily returned home, feeling a sense of triumph. She set up for another seance, this time ready to help Clara find closure. As she lit the candles, the air shimmered with energy, anticipation buzzing around her. "Clara, I found your diary," Emily called, her voice steady. "I'm going to read it to you." As she read aloud, Clara's spirit began to materialize, her face softening with relief. "Thank you. Thank you for remembering me," she whispered, her voice filled with gratitude. As Emily read the final entries, Clara's spirit began to change. The sorrow faded from her eyes, replaced by a peaceful expression. "I can finally rest," Clara said softly. The room filled with a warm light, and the whispers turned to soft laughter. Emily felt a wave of warmth wash over her, as if Clara was embracing her one last time. "You freed me," Clara whispered, her voice now clear and bright. With a final smile, Clara's spirit faded, leaving behind a sense of calm and serenity. The doll, once cursed, now sat silently on the shelf, its dark energy transformed into a gentle presence. In the days that followed, Emily felt a profound change within herself. The weight of the curse had lifted and her home felt lighter. The whispers had ceased, replaced by a sense of peace that enveloped her. She decided to keep the doll, now a symbol of resilience and compassion. Emily placed it in a special display case honoring Clara's memory. Visitors often marveled at the doll's beauty, unaware of the dark history it once held. Inspired by her experience, Emily began volunteering at a local children's shelter, sharing Clara's story and teaching children about empathy and understanding. She found joy in connecting with others, using her experience to inspire those around her. Years passed, but Emily never forgot Clara. On the anniversary of her passing, she held a small memorial in her home, lighting candles and reading excerpts from Clara's diary. As she reflected on the journey they had taken together, Emily felt a presence beside her, a warmth that filled her heart. "Thank you for not forgetting me," Clara's voice echoed softly in her mind. Emily smiled, knowing that Clara had finally found peace. The curse had been broken, and in its place was a legacy of light and love. The doll remained a cherished part of her life, a reminder of the bond they had formed, a bond that transcended time, fear, and darkness. When the Thompson family moved into the old Victorian house on Maple Street, they were filled with excitement and anticipation. The house was a beautiful relic from the past, with ornate woodwork, large windows, and a sprawling garden. However, there was an eerie feeling that seemed to linger in the air, a chill that crept into their bones every now and then. "Just needs a little love," Mark, the father, said, brushing off his wife Sarah's concerns. "We'll make it a home." As they unpacked, the children, Lily and Ben, explored the creaky hallways, their laughter echoing through the empty rooms. But as night fell, shadows danced on the walls, and a strange feeling settled over the family. That first night, as they settled into bed, a soft whisper seemed to pass through the air. "Help me." It was faint, almost like the wind. Sarah dismissed it as her imagination playing tricks, but deep down, a sense of unease took root. The next few days were filled with unpacking and settling in. However, strange occurrences began to unfold. Items would go missing, only to reappear in odd places. Lily claimed to see a little girl in a white dress playing in the garden, while Ben swore he heard giggling coming from the attic. One evening, while Sarah was cleaning the kitchen, she felt a cold breeze sweep through the room, even though all the windows were closed. She turned, heart racing, and caught a glimpse of something white disappearing around the corner. "Mark," she called out, but her husband was busy in the living room. When she approached the hallway, she noticed a small, dusty mirror hanging on the wall. As she wiped it clean, she gasped. In the reflection, a little girl with long, dark hair stood behind her, her face pale and expressionless. But when Sarah turned around, there was no one there. That night, Sarah confided in Mark about what she had seen. "I think this house is haunted," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Don't worry, it's just an old house. We'll get used to it," Mark reassured her. But he couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Determined to uncover the house's history, Sarah visited the local library. After hours of research, she discovered that the Thompson house had once belonged to the Whitfield family, who had lived there for generations. However, the youngest daughter, Emily Whitfield, had mysteriously disappeared one winter night, and the family was never the same. Sarah returned home with a heavy heart, realizing that the little girl she had seen in the mirror might be Emily. She decided to investigate further, hoping to find clues that could help the spirit find peace. Meanwhile, Lily continued to play in the garden, seemingly unfazed by the unsettling atmosphere. One afternoon, she told Sarah about a new friend she had made. "Her name is Emily, and she says she's sad," Lily said innocently. "Emily? Where did you meet her?" Sarah asked, alarmed. "In the attic. She showed me a secret door," Lily replied, her eyes wide with excitement. That evening, Sarah gathered the family and approached the attic door. Mark hesitated, but eventually agreed to let Lily lead the way. As they climbed the stairs, a sense of dread washed over Sarah. The attic was dimly lit, with beams of light streaming through the cracks. Dust danced in the air as the family stepped inside. In the corner, a small door was partially hidden behind a stack of old trunks. "Is this it?" Lily asked, pointing excitedly. "Yes, but we need to be careful," Mark warned, stepping forward. He tried to open the door, but it was stuck. With a grunt, he forced it open, revealing a dark space beyond. As they stepped inside, they were met with a chilling sight. The room was filled with old toys, clothes, and a small bed covered in dust. Sarah's heart sank as she realized this had once been Emily's room, a place where she had played and dreamed. "Emily used to live here," Sarah whispered, feeling the weight of the tragedy. Suddenly, a soft breeze swept through the attic, and the door slammed shut behind them. "Mom, it's cold," Lily exclaimed, shivering. "Let's get out of here," Mark said, panic creeping into his voice. He pushed against the door, but it wouldn't budge. They were trapped. In the dark, panic set in. "What do we do?" Ben cried, clutching Lily's hand. Sarah took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. "Emily, if you're here, we want to help you," she called out. "We just want to understand." The temperature dropped even further, and suddenly the toys around them began to move. The old doll on the bed rolled over, and a soft giggle echoed in the attic. "Help me," the voice whispered, resonating with sadness. "I think she's trying to tell us something," Sarah said, focusing on the voice. "Emily, what happened to you?" The shadows around them seemed to swirl, and a vision formed. A memory of a little girl playing in the attic, her laughter bright. But then the scene changed to a winter night, and Emily was crying alone in the dark. "Help me find my family," the voice urged. Realizing that Emily was trapped in her sorrow, Sarah said, "We will help you find your family, Emily. Just hold on." After what felt like hours, the door finally creaked open, releasing them from the attic's grasp. Shaken but determined, Sarah and Mark decided to visit the town archives the next day to gather more information about the Whitfield family. Through their research, they learned that Emily had gone missing on a snowy night, and her family had searched desperately for her. Sadly, she had been found weeks later, buried in the woods behind the house. The family had never recovered from the loss, and soon after they had moved away. Realizing that Emily's spirit was tied to her unresolved fate, Sarah gathered her family once again. "We need to have a memorial for her, to honor her memory and help her find peace," she proposed. The family agreed, and they planned a small ceremony in the garden where they could remember Emily and give her the farewell she never had. As the day approached, a sense of calm began to settle in the house. On the day of the memorial, the Thompsons gathered in the garden, surrounded by flowers and candles. They shared stories about Emily, expressing their hopes that she could finally rest in peace. Lily placed a handmade card on the makeshift altar, decorated with drawings of flowers and hearts. As they lit the candles, the air felt different, lighter, almost joyful. Sarah closed her eyes and whispered, "Emily, we remember you. You are not alone anymore." Just then, a gentle breeze rustled the leaves, and a soft light seemed to envelop the garden. In that moment, the family felt a sense of warmth and love surrounding them. It was as if Emily was finally letting go, her spirit embracing the love and remembrance they had offered. As they finished the ceremony, Sarah glanced at the house. The shadows that had once lurked in the corners seemed to have lifted. They had given Emily the closure she needed, and in return, she had brought peace to their home. In the days that followed, the Thompsons found a renewed sense of belonging in their home. The whispers had stopped, and the house felt vibrant with life. Lily often played in the garden, her laughter echoing through the air, and she spoke of her new friend Emily, who had become a part of their family story. One evening, as Sarah tucked Lily into bed, she smiled and said, "Emily is happy now, isn't she, Mom?" "Yes, sweetheart," Sarah replied, her heart full. "She's finally at peace." The old Victorian house on Maple Street was no longer just a beautiful relic of the past. It had transformed into a loving home, a place where the echoes of laughter drowned out the whispers of sorrow. Together, they had embraced the past and created a new future filled with hope and love. The Johnson family had always dreamed of owning a home in the countryside. When they found an old farmhouse at a steal of a price, they couldn't believe their luck. It was a charming structure, albeit with creaky floorboards and faded wallpaper. The property came with a large backyard that stretched into dense woods, promising endless adventures for their children, Mia and Ethan. Excited about their new beginnings, they moved in during the fall, the air crisp with the promise of a beautiful season. However, something felt off about the house. It had an atmosphere that was heavy and thick, as if it were holding its breath. One afternoon, while exploring the attic, Mia stumbled upon an old, dusty trunk. Curious, she pried it open, revealing a collection of faded letters and photographs. They were dated from the 1920s, chronicling the lives of the original owners, the Harringtons. "Mom, Dad, look what I found," Mia called, her voice echoing through the house. As the family gathered around, the atmosphere shifted. The letters spoke of strange happenings, whispers in the night, shadows darting past, and a child who vanished without a trace. "What happened to that child?" Ethan asked, wide-eyed, glancing at the dark corners of the attic. "I don't know," Mark replied, unease creeping into his voice. "But we should be careful." As the days passed, the Johnson family tried to shake off the strange feelings that clung to the house. However, peculiar occurrences began to unfold. Doors creaked open on their own, items went missing, and at night, they heard whispers that sent chills down their spines. One evening, Mia confided in her parents, "I keep seeing a little girl outside the window. She's sad, and she keeps pointing to the woods." Mark and Sarah exchanged worried glances. They had both noticed their daughter becoming increasingly withdrawn, often staring out at the woods as if waiting for something or someone. "Let's investigate," Mark suggested, trying to keep the mood light. "We can explore the woods this weekend." The following Saturday, the family set off into the dense thicket. As they ventured deeper, the air grew cooler, and a thick fog enveloped the trees. They stumbled upon an old well, overgrown with weeds and vines. "Be careful, kids," Sarah called out, feeling a shiver crawl up her spine. Suddenly, Mia gasped. "There's a girl in the well," she shouted, pointing. Mark rushed forward, peering into the darkness. "What are you talking about?" "There's someone down there," Mia insisted, fear flashing in her eyes. Mark knelt beside the well, peering into the inky blackness. "I don't see anyone, Mia. Are you sure you're not imagining things?" But Mia was adamant. "I swear, Dad. She needs help." Feeling a surge of protectiveness, Sarah pulled Mia close. "It's okay, sweetie. Let's head back home for now." That night, as the family settled in for bed, the whispers returned, echoing through the halls. "Help me. Help me." The sound seemed to resonate from the walls themselves. "Mia!" Sarah called out, rushing to her daughter's room. "Are you all right?" "I can't sleep, Mom. The girl won't stop calling for help," Mia cried, her voice trembling. Mark rubbed his temples, exhaustion weighing heavily on him. "We'll figure this out. Let's get some rest and look into the history of the house tomorrow." The next day, Mark and Sarah visited the local library, diving deep into the history of their new home. They uncovered shocking details about the Harrington family. It was revealed that the little girl who had vanished was named Eliza, the daughter of the original owners. The family had searched for her for months but had eventually given up, believing she had drowned in the well. With this newfound information, the Johnsons returned home, feeling a mix of sorrow and determination. "We have to help her," Mark said, steeling himself. "We need to give Eliza the closure she never had." That evening, they gathered in the backyard near the well, armed with candles and offerings of flowers. "We want to help you, Eliza," Sarah called out, her voice steady. "We know you're here. We want to honor your memory." As they lit the candles, a gust of wind whipped through the trees, extinguishing their flames. The air grew thick with an unsettling energy. Suddenly, the whispers grew louder, surrounding them. "Help me! Help me!" "Let's go!" Mark shouted, grabbing Mia and Ethan, pulling them back toward the house. But as they turned, the well began to tremble, and a chilling figure emerged from the darkness. Eliza, her face pale and eyes filled with despair. "Help me!" Eliza's voice echoed, her translucent form flickering like a candle in the wind. Mia stepped forward, her heart racing. "Why are you sad, Eliza?" "I can't leave," the spirit whispered, her voice heavy with sorrow. "I'm trapped. I fell. I need to be found." "Found," Ethan echoed, confusion etched on his face. "But how?" Eliza pointed to the well. "The water. It holds my memory. I need someone to remember me, to let me go." Mark and Sarah exchanged worried glances, understanding dawning on them. "We have to bring her peace," Sarah whispered, stepping closer to the well. "Eliza, we promise to remember you." Suddenly, the ground shook beneath them. "Remember," Eliza cried, her voice growing desperate. "You must remember my story." As the whispers intensified, Mark reached into the well, feeling the cold water lapping at his fingertips. "We'll find you, Eliza. We'll honor you." With newfound determination, the Johnsons worked together to create a memorial for Eliza. They gathered flowers from the garden, crafted a small stone marker, and shared stories about the little girl who had once lived in their home. That night, as they gathered around the well once more, they lit candles and placed them carefully along the stones. "You are not forgotten, Eliza," Sarah said, her voice steady. "We honor your memory, and we will remember you." As they spoke, the air around them began to shimmer. Eliza's spirit appeared, glowing softly in the moonlight. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice filled with warmth. "Thank you for remembering me." The wind picked up, swirling around them, and the candles flickered wildly. Eliza's face softened, and for the first time they saw a smile. "I can go now," With that, she floated toward the well, the shimmering light enveloping her. The whispers faded into silence, replaced by a peaceful calm. As dawn broke, the Johnson family felt an overwhelming sense of relief. The heaviness that had lingered in the house had lifted, leaving behind a bright, hopeful atmosphere. In the weeks that followed, the Johnsons found comfort in their home. The whispers had ceased, and they no longer felt a sense of unease. Mia often played in the garden, her laughter echoing through the air as she recounted stories of her friend Eliza to Ethan. The old farmhouse transformed into a warm haven filled with love and memories. Each year, the family would honor Eliza on the anniversary of her passing, lighting candles by the well and sharing her story with friends and neighbors. The Johnsons learned that sometimes the past holds the key to healing the present. With their hearts open, they embraced their new life, knowing that they had helped a lost soul find her way home. The Ramirez family had always dreamed of a spacious home, and when they found an old Victorian house on the outskirts of town, they were thrilled. It had character, history, and a price that seemed too good to be true. Despite its weathered exterior, they saw potential. As they settled in, excitement filled the air. The children, Sofia and Diego, explored every nook and cranny, while Maria and Luis envisioned renovations. Yet, from the moment they moved in, an unsettling feeling lingered in the air, like a secret just out of reach. It started subtly, soft whispers echoing through the halls at night. At first, they dismissed it as the house settling, but soon the whispers grew more distinct. One night, while tucking in Sofia, Maria heard a faint voice calling her name. "Mama." The voice floated through the dark, chilling her to the bone. "Did you hear that?" Maria asked, her heart racing. "Hear what?" Sofia replied sleepily. "Nothing, just go to sleep," Maria said, shaking off her unease. As weeks passed, the whispers became more frequent. Diego claimed he saw shadows darting past his window at night, and Sofia began to talk about her invisible friend. "Mama, she says she used to live here," Sofia said one evening at dinner. Maria exchanged a worried glance with Luis. "Who, sweetheart?" "The girl in the walls," Sofia replied, her eyes wide with innocence. Luis chuckled nervously. "There's no girl in the walls, honey. Just old wood and paint." But Maria couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. One evening, she decided to investigate the basement, where the whispers seemed loudest. The air grew heavy as she descended the creaky stairs. The darkness was palpable, wrapping around her like a shroud. As she reached the bottom, Maria noticed an old, faded photograph stuck to the wall. It depicted a family standing in front of the house, but the faces were scratched out. Confusion washed over her. Why would someone do this? Suddenly, she heard it again. A whisper, clearer this time. "Help me." Frightened, Maria rushed upstairs. She couldn't shake the feeling that the house held secrets that needed to be uncovered. The next day, she decided to visit the local library, hoping to learn more about the history of their home. As she dug through old newspapers and records, a story caught her eye. The house had once belonged to the Wilkins family. They had lived there for decades until tragedy struck. A young girl named Clara had gone missing, and despite extensive searches, she was never found. Maria's heart raced. Could this be the same girl Sofia spoke of? The more she learned, the more she felt an eerie connection to the past. That night, she gathered the family and shared her findings. "I think Clara might still be here," she said, her voice trembling. "Mom, that's just a story," Diego protested. "Maybe, but the whispers, they're real," Maria insisted. Luis, trying to ease the tension, suggested, "Let's just spend some time as a family. We'll explore the house together tomorrow." The next day, armed with flashlights and curiosity, the Ramirez family set out to explore the corners of their home. They searched the attic, the basement, and even the hidden crawl spaces. As they ventured into the attic, they discovered an old trunk filled with toys, clothes, and letters. One letter was addressed to Clara. It spoke of love, loss, and the hope of finding her. "Do you think Clara ever got this?" Sophia whispered, her eyes glistening with tears. "I don't know," Maria replied, her heart aching. "But we have to help her find peace." That evening, they lit candles in the living room and shared their thoughts about Clara. "We want to remember you, Clara," Maria said softly. "You're not forgotten." As they spoke, the air grew thick with energy. Suddenly, a chill swept through the room and the whispers crescendoed into a haunting melody. "Help me. Help me." The following nights grew more intense. Maria and Luis began experiencing vivid dreams of Clara, each time feeling her sorrow and desperation. In one dream, Clara beckoned Maria to follow her into the woods behind the house. The next morning, Maria woke up with an overwhelming sense of urgency. "We have to go to the woods," she told Luis. "Clara wants us to find her." "Are you sure?" "It's just a dream," Luis said, uncertainty in his voice. But Maria was resolute. "I feel it in my bones. We have to try." The family ventured into the woods, the trees looming like ancient sentinels. They followed a narrow path until they stumbled upon an old, overgrown well, hidden beneath thick roots and moss. Sophia gasped. "The well. I saw it in my dream." Diego shivered. "What if she's down there?" "I think she might be," Maria whispered, dread creeping in. They gathered around the well, peering into the darkness. "Clara, can you hear us?" Luis called out, his voice steady despite the fear gnawing at him. Suddenly, a soft glow emanated from the well, illuminating the surroundings. The air grew still and the whispers transformed into a coherent voice, pleading, "Help me." In a moment of clarity, Maria realized Clara's spirit was trapped, not in the well, but within the pain of her unresolved past. "We need to give her a voice," she said, her determination renewed. They returned home, gathering around the fireplace. "Clara, we remember you," Maria began. "You were loved and you deserve to be free." As they spoke, the atmosphere shifted, the temperature dropping. Shadows danced along the walls as the whispers morphed into cries. "Remember me. Help me find peace." Maria closed her eyes, channeling all her love and compassion. "You are not alone, Clara. We're here for you." Suddenly, the room erupted in light. The shadows coalesced into a shimmering figure, revealing Clara, a girl of about 10, with sad eyes that sparkled with hope. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice resonating through the air. With a gentle smile, Clara began to fade, her spirit lifting like a feather caught in a breeze. "I can go now. I'm free." As her presence dissipated, the house sighed with relief. The heavy air lifted, replaced by a sense of peace that enveloped the family. In the weeks that followed, the Ramirez family felt a profound change in their home. The whispers faded, replaced by laughter and warmth. They often talked about Clara, keeping her memory alive in their hearts. Each year, on the anniversary of her disappearance, they would gather in the backyard to honor her. They planted flowers in her memory, creating a small garden dedicated to the little girl who had once been lost. Through their love and compassion, they not only freed Clara's spirit but also transformed their home into a sanctuary filled with joy and connection. The Ramirez family learned that every home has a story, and sometimes those stories need to be told to heal the past. When Jake received an email from an old college friend, he didn't expect it to lead him to an abandoned asylum on the outskirts of town. The invitation was clear. A group of thrill-seeking friends was planning a night of exploration in the infamous Hollow Ridge Asylum, and they wanted him to join. Curiosity piqued, Jake felt a thrill of excitement mixed with apprehension. Hollow Ridge had a dark reputation. Built in the early 1900s, it housed the mentally ill and was notorious for its inhumane treatment of patients. It had been closed for decades, but legends of hauntings and ghostly sightings lingered. Ignoring the warnings from his girlfriend Sarah, who urged him to stay away, Jake packed his gear and set off. As the sun set, he met his friends at the rusted gates of the asylum, an imposing structure draped in shadows. Ready to face your fears? Mark, the ringleader, laughed, swinging open the creaking gate. The group of 5 entered the asylum, flashlights flickering to life in the oppressive darkness. Dust motes danced in the beams of light as they navigated the dilapidated halls, their laughter echoing off the peeling walls. As they explored, the atmosphere shifted. Strange noises reverberated through the building, soft whispers, distant cries, and the occasional crash that sent shivers down their spines. Jake felt a strange connection to the place, as if something was watching them. "Let's check out the old patients' ward," Mark suggested, leading the way. As they climbed the staircase, the air grew colder, and the whispers intensified. They arrived at the ward, the smell of decay lingering in the air. The walls were lined with rusting beds, some still equipped with restraints. It was a chilling reminder of the horrors that had taken place within these walls. "Let's take some photos," Sarah suggested, trying to lighten the mood. But as she snapped pictures, the atmosphere shifted again. The whispers became louder, swirling around them like a storm. Suddenly, a loud bang echoed through the ward, causing everyone to jump. "What was that?" Jake exclaimed, his heart racing. "Probably just the wind," Mark said dismissively. But the unease was palpable. As they continued exploring, Sarah noticed a shadow darting across the hallway. "Did you see that?" she gasped, pointing. "See what?" Jake replied, anxiety creeping in. "I swear I saw someone," she insisted. The group exchanged nervous glances but pressed on, trying to brush off the feeling of being watched. As they entered the main hall, they felt a cold draft sweep through. The whispers grew louder, forming words that seemed to echo from the walls. "Get out. Help me. Remember." Panic began to set in. The laughter had faded, replaced by a palpable tension. "Let's stick together," Jake urged, gripping Sarah's hand tightly. But the moment he said it, the lights from their flashlights flickered and went out. In the pitch black, fear gripped them. They fumbled for their phones, illuminating their faces with ghostly blue light. "This is a bad idea," Sarah whispered, her voice shaking. "Stay close," Mark yelled, trying to maintain his bravado. But as they moved, the sense of being followed grew stronger. Jake felt an overwhelming urge to leave. "We should go back," he insisted, but Mark was determined to explore further. "Just a little longer." As they turned a corner, they stumbled into the remnants of a room lined with old, tattered documents and photographs. One photo caught Jake's eye, an old patient with wild eyes looking directly into the camera, a haunting smile on her face. He felt a chill run down his spine. "This isn't right," he murmured, feeling the whispers escalate to a deafening crescendo. "We need to leave now." As they retraced their steps, the atmosphere shifted dramatically. Shadows flickered in their peripheral vision, and the whispers transformed into screams, haunting cries that echoed through the halls. "Run!" Mark shouted as something darted past them. They sprinted down the corridor, hearts pounding, desperate to escape. Suddenly, Jake felt a cold hand grasp his shoulder. He turned, terror flooding his veins. A figure loomed in the shadows, the same wild-eyed woman from the photo. "Help me," she whispered, her voice filled with sorrow. Jake froze, fear anchoring him to the spot. The others caught up and Sarah screamed, "Get away from him!" But the woman's gaze was pleading, filled with an unbearable sadness. "You have to remember me." Just then, a blinding light flooded the hallway and the whispers faded into silence. The figure disappeared, leaving Jake shaken. "Did you see that?" Jake gasped, breathless. "Let's just get out of here," Sarah urged, pulling him along. They stumbled through the maze of hallways, desperately trying to find the exit. The asylum seemed alive, shifting and changing around them. Every corner they turned led to more darkness and despair. As they neared the front entrance, the front doors slammed shut. "No, we're trapped," Mark yelled, panic setting in. "Try the windows," Jake shouted, but they were all sealed tight. The air grew thick with dread, and the whispers returned, now laced with anger. "Leave this place," they echoed, filling the hall with a chilling urgency. Just then the lights flickered back on, illuminating a path through the shadows. "Follow me," Jake shouted, leading the group towards the light. They bolted down the corridor, pushing through the doors, and burst outside into the cool night air. They collapsed on the grass, gasping for breath, hearts racing. "We made it," Sarah panted, relief flooding her voice. But as they looked back at the asylum, they saw the figure in the window, the woman with wild eyes watching them. Jake felt a sense of guilt wash over him. He had seen her, and now they were leaving her behind. In the days that followed, Jake couldn't shake the memory of the woman's pleading eyes. He felt compelled to return, to learn more about her story. He researched the asylum's history, uncovering tragic accounts of patients who had suffered there. Determined to honor her memory, Jake organized a community event to raise awareness about mental health and the treatment of those in need. During the event, he shared his experience, and the audience listened intently. He concluded, "We must remember those who suffered in silence. We owe it to them to speak up and ensure their stories are never forgotten." As he spoke, he felt a warm presence beside him, as if the woman was there, finally at peace. The echoes of the asylum faded, replaced by a legacy of compassion and understanding. When Emily moved into her new home, a charming yet creaky old house, she was excited to start fresh. It was a quaint neighborhood, filled with friendly faces and whispering trees. While unpacking, she stumbled upon a dusty old box hidden in the attic. Intrigued, she pried it open, revealing a porcelain doll with a cracked face and a frayed dress. It was beautiful, yet something about it sent chills down her spine. As she lifted the doll, a cold breeze swept through the attic, causing her to shiver. Dismissing it as an overactive imagination, Emily decided to clean the doll and place it on a shelf in her bedroom. That night, as she lay in bed, she couldn't shake the feeling that the doll was watching her. She dismissed it as nerves about the new house, but sleep eluded her. The following days were uneventful until strange things began happening. Items in her home would go missing only to reappear in odd places. At night, Emily would hear faint whispers, almost like a soft lullaby echoing through the hallways. One evening, as she prepared for bed, she glanced at the doll. Its eyes seemed to glint in the moonlight. Dismissing it as a trick of the light, she turned away, but a sudden chill filled the room. "Hello?" she whispered, half joking, half nervous. The doll remained silent, but Emily felt an unsettling presence lurking in the shadows. As the days went by, the whispers grew louder. "Emily," they called, sweet and soothing yet filled with a strange urgency. Emily found herself drawn to the doll, compelled to speak to it. "Do you want something?" she asked one night, half laughing at her own absurdity. But the answer came clear. "Play with me." Ignoring the unease creeping into her mind, Emily began to engage with the doll. She would talk to it, tell it her secrets, and in return she felt a strange comfort. But soon she noticed something odd. Every time she interacted with the doll, her energy seemed to drain. One night she had a vivid dream where the doll spoke to her, revealing its name, Clara. In the dream, Clara showed Emily glimpses of her past, fragments of a little girl who had once loved the doll fiercely, only to have it abandoned when the girl mysteriously vanished. Emily awoke in a panic, breathless, and drenched in sweat. The whispers had intensified, now sounding desperate. "Find me, help me," they urged. Determined to uncover the truth, Emily researched the history of the house and the neighborhood. She discovered that years ago, a girl named Clara had lived there and disappeared without a trace. The doll had belonged to her. As the days turned into weeks, Emily felt an undeniable bond with Clara. But with it came a growing sense of dread. The whispers escalated, becoming frantic, urging her to act. "You must find me." One evening, while sorting through old family records, Emily stumbled upon a hidden letter. It was addressed to Clara's parents, pleading for help. The letter spoke of a dark presence in the house, a spirit that had taken Clara away. Feeling a chill run down her spine, Emily realized that the doll was more than just a toy. It was a vessel of Clara's spirit, trapped and seeking release. That night, she decided to confront the doll, asking it what it wanted. In a moment of clarity, she felt Clara's sorrow and anger. "Help me find my body, and I will be free." As the days turned into weeks, Emily felt an undeniable bond with Clara, but with it came a growing sense of dread. The whispers escalated, becoming frantic, urging her to act. "You must find me." One evening, while sorting through old family records, Emily stumbled upon a hidden letter. It was addressed to Clara's parents, pleading for help. The letter spoke of a dark presence in the house, a spirit that had taken Clara away. Feeling a chill run down her spine, Emily realized that the doll was more than just a toy. It was a vessel of Clara's spirit, trapped and seeking release. That night, she decided to confront the doll, asking it what it wanted. In a moment of clarity, she felt Clara's sorrow and anger. "Help me find my body, and I will be free." With a newfound purpose, Emily set out to uncover the truth of Clara's disappearance. She visited the local library, scouring through newspapers and records from decades past. The more she dug, the darker the story became. Clara had been last seen playing near the woods at the edge of the neighborhood. Rumors swirled about a hidden cave where a malevolent spirit was said to lurk, preying on lost children. Determined to find closure for Clara's spirit, Emily gathered supplies and made her way to the woods. As she ventured deeper, she felt the weight of unseen eyes upon her, the whispers growing louder, urging her onward. This way. This way. Finally, she arrived at the mouth of the cave, dark and foreboding. With a deep breath, she stepped inside, her flashlight flickering against the damp walls. The air was thick, filled with an oppressive energy. Inside the cave, the whispers transformed into anguished cries. "Help me! Save me!" they echoed. Emily felt a surge of fear, but she pressed on, determined to find Clara's remains. As she ventured further, she stumbled upon an old, dusty trunk. Heart racing, she opened it, revealing a collection of old toys and clothes, and buried beneath them, Clara's skeletal remains. Overcome with emotion, Emily began to cry. "I'm so sorry," she whispered, feeling Clara's presence surround her. The whispers transformed into a chorus of gratitude. "Thank you. Thank you." But just then, the dark presence in the cave stirred. An icy wind swept through, and Emily felt a malevolent force approaching. She needed to leave, but not before giving Clara a proper farewell. Emerging from the cave, Emily felt a weight lift from her shoulders. The whispers had faded, replaced by a serene calm. She had fulfilled her promise to Clara, allowing her spirit to finally rest. Back home, she placed the doll on a shelf, but this time it felt different, lighter, almost content. Emily knew she would never forget Clara, but she also understood that some connections, though haunting, could lead to healing. In the days that followed, the strange occurrences ceased. The house felt warm and inviting, filled with a sense of peace. Emily often spoke to Clara, sharing her life and dreams, feeling a gentle presence watching over her. With the darkness behind her, Emily embraced her new beginning, knowing that she had brought closure not only to Clara but also to herself. A group of friends, Jake, Lisa, Tom, and Sarah, decided to spend the weekend camping in the Whispering Woods, a location notorious for its eerie atmosphere and local legends. The woods had a long history of disappearances, but that only fueled their excitement. They set up camp, lit a fire, And as night fell, the stories began. "Have you heard about the ghost of the woods?" Tom asked, leaning closer to the fire. "They say if you listen closely, you can hear her whispering your name." Lisa rolled her eyes but couldn't suppress a shiver. "It's just a story to scare kids," she replied, trying to sound dismissive. But as the night deepened, the temperature dropped and the wind began to pick up. Jake glanced at the trees swaying and thought he heard a faint whisper riding the wind. "Did you hear that?" he asked. But everyone shrugged it off, attributing it to the rustling leaves. As they settled into their tents, the whispers seemed to grow louder. Jake couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Throughout the night, he woke repeatedly to faint voices just beyond the tree line. Each time he ventured outside to investigate, he found nothing but shadows dancing under the moonlight. The next morning, the group decided to hike deeper into the woods. They followed a narrow trail lined with ancient trees, their gnarled branches twisting towards the sky. The further they walked, the quieter it became, as if the woods themselves were holding their breath. As they reached a clearing, they stumbled upon a decrepit cabin. "Look at this place," Tom exclaimed, peering through the cracked windows. The cabin appeared long abandoned, yet something about it drew them in. Inside the cabin, dust coated every surface, and the air was thick with the smell of mildew. They found old furniture, a broken piano, and scattered papers, remnants of a life once lived. Among the debris, Lisa discovered a tattered journal. "It's from someone named Mary," she read aloud. "She writes about hearing voices in the woods, urging her to follow them. She disappeared one night and her parents never found her." The atmosphere shifted as Lisa spoke. The whispers returned, swirling around them, beckoning them to listen. "Stay with us. Join us," they seemed to say, echoing through the walls of the cabin. Jake felt a chill run down his spine. "We should go," he urged. But the group was mesmerized by the journal. It was as if they could feel Mary's presence lingering in the air. That night, they returned to their campsite, but the whispers followed them. They could no longer pretend it was just the wind. Every rustle of leaves seemed like a voice, calling their names, filling them with a sense of dread. As they sat around the campfire, Tom suddenly stood up, his eyes glazed over. "I need to go back," he mumbled, walking towards the woods. "Tom, wait!" Sarah cried, but he didn't stop. The group chased after him, fear gripping their hearts. "Tom, come back!" Jake shouted, but Tom only walked deeper into the trees. Just as they were about to grab him, he turned and smiled, a chilling, unnatural grin. "Don't you hear them? They're calling us," he said. Before disappearing into the darkness, panic erupted among the group. "We have to find him!" Lisa shouted, her voice trembling. They split up, calling Tom's name, but the whispers grew louder, drowning out their shouts. "Join us! Stay with us!" they echoed, wrapping around them like a sinister embrace. Jake and Sarah searched frantically, but the trees seemed to shift, closing in on them. Every path they took led them in circles, deeper into the woods. The night felt endless, and the once comforting sounds of nature now felt like a warning. Finally, they stumbled upon the cabin again. "We have to look inside," Jake insisted. They rushed inside, hoping to find clues about Tom. The journal lay open on the floor, pages flipping in a non-existent breeze. "Help us! Find him!" the whispers taunted. They felt the air grow heavy, as if the cabin itself was alive and watching. Suddenly, Lisa pointed to a corner of the room. "Look!" she exclaimed. There, beneath the floorboards, was a trapdoor. Heart-pounding, they pried it open, revealing a dark staircase leading down into the depths below. "Do we really want to go down there?" Sarah whispered, fear evident in her voice. "We have to find Tom," Jake replied, determination driving him forward. They descended into the darkness, their flashlights flickering against the damp walls. At the bottom, they discovered a hidden room filled with old toys and remnants of a child's life. In the center stood a mirror, cracked and dusty. As they approached, the whispers turned into screams. "Join us! You cannot leave." Suddenly, Tom appeared in the mirror's reflection, his face twisted in fear. "Help me!" he cried, but when they turned to look at him, he was gone. Jake realized the truth. The woods were feeding off their fear, trapping them in a cycle of despair. They needed to escape before they became like Mary, lost forever. Frantically, they retraced their steps, sprinting through the darkened woods, the whispers growing louder, more desperate. "You can't leave. You belong to us now." Just as the darkness threatened to swallow them whole, they stumbled upon the edge of the woods where the moonlight shone bright. The whispers faded to a whisper, replaced by silence. "Where's Tom?" Sarah panted, looking back into the trees. "We can't leave him." "We have to get help," Jake urged, pulling her away from the woods. But as they reached their campsite, the darkness seemed to surge behind them, an ominous force preventing them from returning. When dawn broke, Jake and Sarah emerged from the woods, but they were alone. They alerted the authorities, who searched the area, but Tom was never found. The Whispering Woods had claimed another soul. Haunted by the experience, Jake couldn't shake the feeling of the whispers still echoing in his mind. Years later, he returned to the edge of the woods, determined to confront the darkness. As he stood there, the familiar whispers returned, sweet and inviting. "Come back. Join us." They beckoned. But this time Jake was ready. He turned away, vowing to spread the story of the woods, ensuring that others would heed the warnings. The woods might whisper, but he wouldn't let them claim another victim.